you try to hit that other panel? Never mind.
Town manager for Glasgow, right?
You can start the recording on that.
No.
All right, we're going to call the Water Bureau regular meeting for Wednesday, August 30th, 2023 to order. You've done a roll call?
I'm gonna email it to
We
you
have a
second.
quorum.
We have a quorum, okay. The next thing on the agenda is public comments relative to the agenda items. If there's anybody wishing to speak, please go right ahead.
Judy Allen, West Hartford. I'm not going to talk about the financial implications with Niagara. I do want to point out that both the water and sewer ordinances never use the term economic development rate, but rather they are discount rates based on large volume. I went and checked out regional water authorities' economic development rate because they are a regional body, public, like the MDC. They offer an economic development rate as an incentive to encourage new commercial and industrial customers that are significantly expanding operations. So it's a charge that can be used, it's a rate that can be used by a business that is already established. We also assist distressed businesses contemplating closing by assessing the customers at 80% of applicable water rates for the first 5 years of occupancy. After the initial 5-year period, we will assess the customer its full applicable water rates. They fund a full-time position to work with Chamber of Commerce, dedicated to supporting the region's entrepreneurs, local businesses, and providing solutions and support so they can create new jobs and thrive. I think the MDC could work more closely with member towns to look at this very issue. What kind of economic development do the towns really want? As of August of this year, their first customer using their economic development rate is a water brewing facility who bottles nearly 14 million gallons of non-alcoholic beer per year. To qualify for the rate, customers must use at least 500 gallons of water a year, and that rate expires after 5 years. It's a rate that would allow many more industries and businesses to be able to partake of this kind of help in expanding or coming to the area. And I keep thinking about the bagel store in my community. It's the best bagels in the world. And they used to have lines of customers out the door because they're so small. As of COVID, now you have to actually call and phone in your order and have a selected time that you're going to pick it up. This is a business that could really use to expand, and it's a high water intensity business. And I would hope that there could be something that could be used for a business like this. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Anybody else from the public wishing to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Attorney Joseph Sharayko, Independent Consumer Advocate. I also wanted to speak about agenda item, I believe it is 4, and I strongly echo Ms. Allen's comments, and I wish to call to this Bureau's attention Attorney Silverstone's comments back in February of 2020 about the proposed rate at the time. And he highlighted certain aspects of an economic development rate, such as fixed terms for rate incentives, as well as potentially some other conditions along the lines of what Ms. Allen mentioned, such as, conditioning the applicability of the economic development rate on perhaps a yearly consumption requirement, making it applicable for not only large volume users, but maybe distressed businesses basically making the rate more malleable such that it can apply depending upon the circumstances of a potential a customer who might potentially qualify. I also noted in looking at some of the minutes around this time back in early 2020 when the rate was first implemented that one of the underlying rationales, at least as mentioned by former District Counsel Halloran, was that the MDC at that time was the only water company in the state of Connecticut that did not have a discount rate for large volume users. And so while that, may have been the case, it no longer is, but I think to the extent that the Bureau and the District Board are compelled or feel compelled to look at other water companies' rates and how they use and apply them, they should not just take what appears to be a volume-based approach. And in reality, it appears to only apply to customers like Niagara. So I would urge that in closing that this rate be re-examined and it be potentially repealed and modified, or at the very least discussed extensively. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else either here or online that would like to speak under public participation? Anybody else? Hearing none, we're going to go to the next thing on the agenda, which is the approval of meeting minutes of April 24th, 23 and June 13th, 2023. I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Motion made. Is there a second? A second. Is there any corrections or discussion? Yes.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, the meeting in June didn't have a quorum, so do we still vote on that? Or was it turned into an informational meeting? Does that, what are the rules?
I don't think we took any action that meeting, even though we didn't have a quorum, but I'll leave it to John.
Yeah, this is John Myrtle. Yeah, there was no quorum at the June meeting, so that's why we need to do the April as well. Even in instances where we don't have a quorum, minutes are produced and it reflects that. And if there's discussion that occurs or presentation, sometimes that's included as well. But so even though there was no quorum, there were meeting minutes produced for that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimous to approve the minutes of April 24th and June 13th. Next thing on the agenda is a discussion of economic development rate, and I'll turn this over to our CEO.
Yes, thank you, Scott Jellison. Dave Banker, you here? I see a tie on, so I figured you'd be getting up and give us a little presentation. I know this has been a long outstanding discussion Mrs. Allen asked us to look at. So Dave, why don't you go ahead and explain the credit in which Niagara is receiving as part of this ordinance.
So I haven't actually prepared a presentation for today. There's just what John is bringing up right now is just a summary of since the rate went into effect in 2020, the volumetric usage in CCFs per year, and then also the quantities which they qualified for under that reduction. You can just leave it up there, John.
You don't need to share that, Julie.
Yeah. So the water rate, there's a water rate reduction, which is a lower rate applied to usage over 800 CCFs per day. And then similar to the Clean Water Program charge, so once the usage goes over that rate per day, averaged over the billing cycle, then the Clean Water Program charge is only applied to the percent that's discharged to the sewer after that. So you can see, so in 2023, thus far this year, there's been a $40,000 reduction in the potential from the full water rate to what's been charged to Niagara with the rate reduction for the water. And then on the sewer side, that reduction is larger because they just charge a smaller amount of their consumption since they're bottling the water. So that reduction in the Clean Water Program charge is $200,000. So,
Dave, if you, I'm sorry, through Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Dave, did you calculate, what that $40,000 on the water side would do to, decrease, the water rate for everybody?
yes. So.
Yeah, they might have it on a table. Is that page 3?
Can't read it.
Come on, just scroll down.
No, this is what was sent to John. No,
It's not that one?
Yeah.
All right, so the average reduction over the course of a full year, over the past 2 years or so, has for the water rates been $70,000. Right now, we're halfway through the current year, so that's why it's around 40. So the 70,000 reduction, if you had to make up that revenue over the full quantity of CCF sold, it would be around 0.004 cent per CCF increase. So 0.4 of a penny per CCF increase to every customer in the district.
And so, you know, one of the things that we have said consistently about this program, as you know, we adopted this in 2016, then we repealed it in 17, and then we put it back in 18. And the one thing, I think, Mrs. Allen and might even, Attorney Shareko said, we use this example. I don't know if it's true anymore, but when we were talking about this a couple of years ago with Regional Water Authority, they have an economic development rate, but has never been implemented at the time. So I don't know if that's true now, but they had never implemented. But the one thing that we have to be careful of, or take into consideration, is when we keep changing the rate, it sends a message to economic development. I'm glad to hear Mrs. Allen said we should be talking to our towns about economic development opportunities. But if I remember in 2016, I was almost, it wasn't fun because we were accused of conspiring with our towns to encourage water bottling companies to come to Bloomfield or Windsor. So I agree 100% that we should be engaged in that process. We're not driving the bus when it comes to development. Our towns are. We're simply here to make sure that we support our towns with providing infrastructure so that they can develop their towns. The more tax base our towns make, the better off the other 7 towns are. We've seen a lot of increase in the revenues received in Bloomfield, and that benefited all of the 7 towns. Do we know how much Niagara has paid into Bloomfield for taxes?
John,
It was approximately $1 million a year for personal property and real property taxes.
Okay.
As of 2022.
Yeah. So the point is, that's what our job is, right? Our job is to help our towns grow to where they want to grow, whatever that is. Windsor decided, for whatever reason, when Niagara came to town in 2016, they decided they just didn't want any part of it. Whatever the reason was, Bloomfield decided they wanted to support Niagara, and they're making and Niagara's been a very, very good resident for Bloomfield. They've been very supportive of local community programs, but that's what you're talking about. You're talking about 0.04 of a cent, right? And on the clean water surcharge, $200,000 over a $400 million program is probably even a smaller percentage. It doesn't impact the resident at all. And I just think sending the message of changing this rate, we've had a couple of instances over the last couple of months where some high users were considering coming to some of our towns. And the way that these developments occur, they come in, they look, they kick the tires, they may or may not decide to come, and that's just what happens. And we've got the same thing happening right now in Windsor Locks. And so those developers come and go and may decide to come into our town. But I just think if we keep changing this rate, it's just going to send a message for our towns that, and did the rate structure have anything to do with Niagara coming? I don't know. but I do know that changing the rate is not good for business. So,
Okay, Commissioners? Yes, Andy?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. When this rate came out, I was definitely supportive and still am. At the time, we suggested we were going to be making the towns well aware that this was a tool that they should be putting in their toolboxes for when there were potential developments coming into town, that they should be aware that this, so I want to make sure we're still doing that.
we are.
Secondly, do we have any, I couldn't tell from these charts, I tried, I can't read them on the laptop too well, or the iPad. There's nothing on here, but what, if any, additional, output came as a result of this rate? When we implemented it in 2020, what were they buying then and what are they average buying now?
Dave, you can answer that.
Let's see. Let me flip back through. 1 second. So in 2020, the average use for their water consumption for that calendar year was 750,000 gallons per day. Now through 2022, 2020, through last year, we'll say the last complete year, that's 800,000 gallons per day.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner.
Commissioner Gardo here. I'm looking at this chart here. We have the water rate in columns 3, 4, and 5, and then we have the clean water in the next 3. And then there's the sewer dollar CCF of $5.90. And I went to the MDC website, and I couldn't find the sewer discharge rate anywhere. What is that? And because I know we do sewer through Avalorum. So what is that and how, or did I not look hard enough?
So there are 2 different rate sheets on the website. One posts the water rates, and there's a second location that has other rates that I believe the sewer discharge rate is included in there. So for the majority of our customers, their sewer usage is paid for via ad valorem, which is through the property taxes with the town. For large users, which use more than, John, correct me if I'm wrong, is it 50,000 gallons per day?
12,000 CCF.
So if the large users that use more than that rate that's set within our ordinances, then pay for their sewer usage, based on that higher volume that they're using, because basically the quantity collected through the property taxes, which may be 3% or so charged to the towns, would not cover their sewer usage since they're using a higher volume of water. So those customers pay based on the sewage or their water usage and sewage that's discharged.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do they actually have flow meters for the sewer discharge?
For Niagara, they do have a flow meter set.
All right, well, thank you.
That's if I may, that's an ordinance, so we're required to do that.
I ran out of time, so.
Sure.
But the other thing I did is I searched for, in the water rates, kind of getting back to what Commissioner Adel said, I don't see on the water rates what's called the explanation of charges. What's the agenda item? This is the economic development rate. I don't see the economic development rate here, and I searched the MDC website for economic development, and it came back with partners in recognition. I clicked on that, and there was a picture of you with a bunch of other knuckleheads. So, how?
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll look into that. It's not there, and we'll make sure it is there.
Right, because if we do want to use it as an economic engine, it should be.
Sure.
It should be there. If I search, now, did I spell it? I think I spelled it right, but
Yep.
I couldn't find it. And you look very nice in the photograph, along with the other folks. But getting back to the, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Niagara is a a family-owned business, and I was figuring out, searching around, on something called Owler.com, they had $1.6 billion in revenue. I don't know if that's true, because then I went somewhere else and it had a different number, and I went somewhere else, and because it's a private company, you don't know. I think they can afford this, and as what was stated by, Ms. Allen, if it is an economic development tool and they're successful, I believe, a sunset or some sort of, I don't think it should go away, all right, from the point of view, because economic development is good, but there comes a point where, if you get them here and they build the infrastructure, it's not like a food truck where they'll go to the next town, okay? They have a lot of infrastructure built in, and I think that this rate should be looked at with that, because I agree, the last thing you want is to move the chairs around on everyone every so often. This has been going on now for 3.5 years since the ordinance was changed, but we still only have one customer doing this, and maybe because it's not on the website, maybe that's the reason why. So I think we should investigate some sort of sunset on this, and I because they aren't putting it down the drain as they use it, the clean water, you can't have them pay for stuff that's not going down the pipe, because they do have a meter on the sewer pipe anyhow, so we know what that value is. So.
We are happy to, look at some of the options that we could present during budget season and see if there's if the board so chooses to, create some kind of a sunsetting program. Others have it. I do agree in concept there. I don't believe. I think people that need a lot of water, because we deal with this on a regular basis, they are very organized and educated on, they don't, this isn't happenstance, right? They have researchers, geologists. We get phone calls from geologists all the time asking us questions about our water resource, and you have these developments that are highly sophisticated in searching out not just for the water and not just for the sewer, but they're looking at the business. Niagara, as we said before, Niagara, the reason why they wanted to come to Connecticut or New York at the beginning was because they wanted to be within 300 miles of their market. And they were down in Philadelphia. So their business model was, we need to get 300 miles north. And that's what's driving their discussion. I think even more so, Niagara was we're looking for a friendly community to go to. Because in 2016, I was very naive as to the water bottling industry and how it was perceived across, certain sectors and across the country. So we can look at that, Commissioner, and we can provide some options and see what the Board, Water Bureau would like to do.
Good, thank you.
Yes. Chairman, this was a economic development project that was more than just MDC. It was Department of, that they took advantage of the state legislation that allowed them to phase in the property tax over 7 years. There was a sunset in that situation. It's a 5-year period. But the significant part of it was that it was the availability of the water that brought them here. And I believe that piece of property, if my memory serves me right, was thrown off about $13,000 or $14,000 a year in sales in property tax. And now it's thrown off over a couple $1 million. I believe they're the largest taxpayer in the town of Bloomfield, and a significant number of jobs, I think, that exceeded 122 or 24. So you know, we were just one part of that. And they came here. Now, given PFAS problems and some of the other issues that are facing people relative to their water now, and you're going to see more of that. We've been testing our water for the last 3 years.
3/4.
Well,
Yeah, we
3/4,
tested
but we
14.
technically go back 3 or 4 years when we started testing. We don't have PFAS in our water. That's going to have a significant impact on people in this industry that are taking it out of wells, that most of those wells are contaminated. So, you know, who knows what's going to happen, but unfortunately, we got into an industry where it wasn't the question of whether it was the water that was being put in, it was being put in a plastic bottle, which we had no control over, but the General Assembly did, and no one went to the General Assembly. If they did, the General Assembly wasn't receptive to restricting that kind of a development situation, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Slimming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the maintaining the rates that we've set in the past, I know, Scott, you pointed out that we had them, we didn't have them. It was really bad, you know, that we switched around. But, you know, we've heard for years, and certainly I've heard for years from our consultants that, you know, Wall Street and Moody's and Standard & Poor's, so they sort of respect stability. They respect organizations that come to a sensible plan and then stick to it, you know, and people that bounce around, you know, it shows that they don't really have confidence in, you know, like exactly what they're doing. So I would say that, you know, that we have an economic development rate that we use for them. And I think all we really need to decide is, you know, if we can apply that to someone else for some other reason, I suppose, you know, in the future. But the rate itself seems to work, you know, for us. And then secondly, I'd say as far as like coming to a point where we turn it off, I mean, they're buying 800,000 gallons of water a day. Is that what you're saying? It was 800,000 gallons of water a day.
Yes.
So a decision to turn that off is a decision for us not to sell that much water over the course of a year, or the difference that we make up. I mean, to me, that's like shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, we come up with a good plan and we actually sell more water than we're selling because we don't sell as much water to commercial entities, and this seemed to have worked out. But I would say that, you know, as far as the rate itself, that I think stability is important. It's working for us. There's no reason for us to have to change it. It's not costing us anything. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good points. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Chairman, just for my clarification, so do we have a definition of economic development? Is that based on number of gallons used, or economic development means that a small business who wants to use this rate is eligible or not?
Yeah, the definition is defined by ordinance, so it is, you have to use on average, Dave, 600,000 gallons per day, annual average,
It's 800 CCFs time per day
on average, right?
over the billing period.
Billing period, for the month.
Yeah.
So it's a monthly, so if you exceed that rate, over the month, you get the rate, but if you don't, the following month, you don't get it.
So it means that there is some return on investment more than 600,000 gallons or whatever. Is that the, what is the intent of like defining this parameter, right? Because we talk about economic development. The economic development is, again, constrained by 600,000 gallons, right? It's not across the board.
Well, what we did was, Commissioner, if I may, Scott Jellison, so we had this debate a number of years, and, you know, we could lower that rate. And when we first started this in 2016, we had it at 500,000 gallons a year, average day. And then the decision was to raise that. I know that there is, you know, to be fair to the environmental community as it relates to bottling water companies, I know there's a fear that, that our rate is going to attract additional bottling water companies. But knowing what I've experienced, and it was painful with Niagara, I don't think Niagara came to the MDC because of our water rate. They came because they were thrown out of New York. Maine's been fighting with Nestle for 100 years. And they had a town called Bloomfield that was willing to accept them. And that was more important to them, and it met their 300-mile radius, and the rate was great. And so it's just a piece that we can do for our towns to help development. But you could lower that. But then the point here, if you lower that 600,000 or the 500,000 gallons a day on average to some lower number, then yeah, you could spur additional economic development, but you're also going to have the debate of, but now it's costing everybody money and you're going to lose revenue. So it's a balance.
And I was just thinking from global perspective, when we talk about economic development, it's like, you're not going to get this type of business, every 5 years, right? It's only one, and who knows, maybe next when it will come, right? So economic development, we are talking about, every town has economic development going on, housing projects, commercial projects, whatever, right? That's what is bread and butter for every town, right? So I was just thinking from that perspective, should we look at that aspect and do some cost benefit analysis and say somebody is using 600,000, we are getting X. If somebody's using 1,000 gallons, we have to pay, for example, to provide 1,000 gallons benefit.
Yeah, agree.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions for staff? All right, hearing none, we're going to go on to the next thing, which is item number 5, which is a report from our raw water master plan.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, Jessica Coelho is going to give us a presentation. She gave an excellent presentation at the last Water Bureau meeting. I don't think that was did we have a quorum on that? No. So Jessica did a great job. She went through 60 slides in less than an hour. Excellent. What we're going to do here is just give you the punchline, and we're going to talk about the punchline of the raw water. We've been working on this for literally 5 years, but we're not asking for any decisions. This is a big topic. This is a big discussion. This is anywhere from a $400 to a $700 million project. This is a 30-year program. We're going to need, once we get through the budget cycle, we need to really have a discussion at a special Water Bureau meeting, special Board of Finance. We just one agenda item to talk about this. The chairman recommended, and I agree, that we, meet to go to our towns and talk about this. It's a big project, necessary project, but Jessica's going to give us the punchline tonight. 5 minutes.
Here we go. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. That was actually lovely segue. I get to jump right in now. So just a quick recap here. This is just a timeline. We started this project in 2017 with our team, and this is what we've accomplished to date. We've done a lot in the last few years. This here is a schematic of our existing water main, our transmission main, raw system, and our treatment plants. So you have our Barkampton Reservoir and Nepog reservoirs. They run, the water flows from there through our transmission main system to our Reservoir 6 and West Hartford water treatment plants. Shown here is the same schematic. This is our recommended plan. So we are recommending to you that we keep this same layout, but on the red side here, the text that's pointed out on the red, these are points in the transmission system that we recommend that we move forward for improvements. They're basically any water crossings. So you have the pipeline that runs under the Lake McDonough, and you have pipelines that run under the river in several spots. So those are our priority areas that we recommend moving forward with within our plan. On the purple text on the right, you will see our West Hartford treatment plant highlighted in red. Reservoir 6 water treatment plant is a newer plant built in the 70s. It is a newer technology that can easily continue to be upgraded, whereas West Hartford water treatment plant, those of you who had toured the plants, it's very different technology. It's an older, beautiful technology, but slow sand filters is not easily upgraded. It's an aging plant, parts of it 100 years old. So our recommendation is to replace this plant. Also, we have basins on site that need to be replaced per DPH regulations. This is just a quick overview of our aerial of West Hartford treatment plant as it is today. Our recommendation is to build a plant here. Our demands are much lower than they were when we built this plant, so we could take some filters offline and use some of that real estate to build a new plant. This is just a concept right now. We haven't gotten to the design phase at all yet, but this is just to give you an idea of what we could do. And more detail, which you guys would have with you on your slideshows and printed out for you. On the left would just be the components of a potential new plant, and on the right are all the transmission mains that we currently have. You can see as needed upgrades are the first chunk. Those are all the mains that you saw in the schematic that if we needed to, we could upgrade. And the last line there are our priority projects, which would be all the river crossings and Lake McDonough. So recommended next steps, immediate next steps. We need to design and construct a new 5 million gallon tank at West Hartford Water Treatment Plant. We've already started some of this where we did survey with our own survey crew, and we've started coordinating with vendors to get an idea on the feasibility of construction of a new tank and pricing so we could get that ball rolling. Reservoir 6 water treatment plant upgrades and maintenance. Things like the under drains have already begun. We've already started to replace those. Electrical and coagulant upgrades are underway. So those two items are just things that we're already starting to get the ball rolling on. Other things we recommend moving forward with immediately would be designing and constructing new and or redundant pipelines where it's most important. We feel that the Farmington River crossing, known as the Ford or Upper Crossing, is one of our priority pipelines. It's a single pipeline, so we'd like to address that earlier in our plan. Also, Elizabeth Park Transmission Main, which is on the distribution side, but would help us on the transmission side. Lake McDonough bypass system, we'd like to address that priority that we pointed out earlier. Other appurtenances, valves, and blow-offs that need addressing right away. And also a new water treatment facility. As I mentioned, we want to replace the West Hartford plant, but we need to start with a study and a pilot design before we could get started any further than that. So all of that we consider to be phase 1, and we consider that to be done in the first 7 years if we get going. So again, you see the same projects listed out. This actually totals a hefty $47 million, but it is a lot of work, large transmission mains, major construction. You'll see a line there, referendum 2028. In phase 1, we should start planning for this. As you know, we have constraints with our project spending. So if we were to build a new plant, that is a big priced item that we would have to get a referendum for. So in phase 2, which would be the remaining years leading up to about 2040, we would want to then construct the new treatment plant and design the remaining tanks on site for storage, as well as any other river crossings we haven't addressed yet, any other upgrades we need to address. And phase 1 and 2, we would consider our priority required projects as part of our plan. Phase 2 alone is approximately $264 million. I'd like to throw out a little caveat that these dollars are very high-level estimates at this point, and as we design, we would refine these prices as we progress. This graph here just shows the cash flow, and just for phase 1 and 2, as I said, these are what we consider the required projects. So totaling $311 million, plus or minus. This shows the annual cash flow in blue bars. Treatment plan being online by year 13, give or take, or yeah, it's shown there in the wrong line. It would actually be year 13. The initial first phase, or that first 7 projects in the beginning, you can see we obviously spend more for the plant. By year 18, we would be done with our major projects that our plan recommends to move forward on. The gray line there shows our bonding costs throughout the years, so it goes 20 years beyond the end of our projects. This one here is more about cost to the customer. So for these priority projects, obviously these are hefty projects. It's going to be a cost to our customer on the rate. We anticipate for the first phase about 16 cents to go up for those first 7 years, but by the end of it, I believe it's about $2.10 might go up by the end of the entire project. Or in this case, sorry, $1.28 for this first chunk. That is shown by the gray bar there. The blue line shows the total cost to the average customer. So we're almost at about $2,000 by the end of year 38 for these projects. The final phase of the plan, because this plan was intended to be about a 30-plus year plan, is what we would do with the remaining transmission mains. So I mentioned in one of the other slides, as needed upgrades. Those mains that we haven't touched yet because we can repair them as we need to, we did plan for replacing them. So if we wanted to have an entirely brand new system, we could do this for up to about an additional $336 million. This is 35 miles of transmission main that we could address if we needed to. Keep in mind that this wouldn't be until after we address the required projects. So that means that we have time to look into different technologies. There is a chance that in 10 more years, there'll be many more rehab lining technology out there that we could also look to that would cost less than digging. But for comparison purposes, we looked at replacements and this is what we found. So all in all, our initial priority work and our remaining required projects, 311, up to an additional 336 to continue to replace, and then totaling up to about $647 million. I know this is a very big number, but we did do a very detailed evaluation for those of you who were here for the last presentation, and this was actually one of the lowest costs. This just shows everything all together. You can see the as-needed upgrades section going out to year 31, so we do add some years of cash flow and project spending there, and the bonding, of course, in turn goes out longer. And again, the cost to the customer. So the first 7 years didn't change. We know that would go up to about 16 cents. This is where the total cost to the customer rate may go up about $2.10, and the average customer would see about $4,000 cost throughout the project life.
Before you leave that slide.
Yes, sir.
Bob, I'm not going to ask you to talk tonight, but it's a big topic we got to talk about in the next Water Bureau and for finance. And what I've asked Bob to do is to look at creating, in these first 7 years, as you've already talked about, you talked about this first 7 years, 47 million is the same for any of the scenarios. So that 47 million is going to cost roughly 16 cents. Last year we gave back 28 cents. What we're going to recommend this year is that we create a rate stabilization fund just similar to the Clean Water Project. And so if we have revenues, which we believe and hopefully we will, by the end of this year, that we have additional revenues from water sales, that we think about the concept, Bud, of at Board of Finance creating a rate stabilization fund and utilizing that money to start the seed money for this first 7 years. And then the goal would be is that we can prove to the community, and within 7 years, we're doing all this work in preparation for the master plan, hasn't cost them a penny, and then we'll have to go to referendum at some point. And so that's going to be a challenge with everything going on, but at least it'll start the ball rolling. It's almost like setting up the OPEB trust fund. You know, we really need to start developing some funding for this planning.
Commissioner Slimming.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, if I can ask on sort of backing up on the raw water to the beginning of it. So we do have, it wasn't shown on your little graphic, but we do have the ability to deliver raw water to New Britain. So you can see that in the plan, and you know, looking down the road, you know, think that might happen again sometime. We had to, when we did need to do it, I forgot how many years ago it is now. Just
It was 2016 drought.
Yeah, it was the drought 16. So we had to rebuild our pump station, or so we had to do a bunch of things that in order to make that happen. So I mean, I realize it's probably a very small part of this raw water plan, but it's still there though, right? I mean, and we still have the ability to do it.
It's actually their pump station. The New Britain, they have rights to, when we built the Nepog Reservoir, 5 million gallons a day, but they have a pump station located at the base of Phelps Brook Dam that they have to upkeep. We just have a water meter and they pay us, I think the raw water rate's $1.50 now per gallon. So yeah, that was in 16, it might have been $1 then, now it's $1.50, I think, but
They basically just
but it is their pump station.
reservoir, and then they treat it after they treat.
They literally pump it over hills and through the woods to their system. It's quite an elaborate system they have to get the water. from our reservoir to their plant.
Okay, I'm just curious if that was still part of, it's still in there, we're still.
We basically, the 5 million gallons is accounted for, it comes off our safe yield. We know that it's reserved for them if they are going to use it.
Thank you, appreciate it, just check, that's all, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions?
Chairman, is there a graph that shows and combines all our projects that is, that we are charging to customers? So that shows like, cumulatively what years, you might be paying 16 plus something or minus something because we are paying them back. So that shows that whole picture of all the projects that we are undertaking and everything we are charging and also giving discount or whatever.
Yes, we do. So that's our debt service, right? So our debt service is driving part of our water rate. And during the budget cycle, we provide the CIP requests, and you see that, and you see the debt service component of the water rate. So we will provide that in this coming budget.
Any other questions? Commissioner?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Gardo. You talked about the transmission main through Elizabeth Park, which is phase 1, and and on slide 5-9, the planning transmission mains. I'm just curious. I know that there's been talk about the ones underneath the Connecticut River, and you have priorities for all those things. Are we okay until 2041 with those, or is that something that has to be done sooner? Or
So we did do, and a few years ago, we did some condition assessments of some of the pipelines. So we were able to get inside and take video inside the pipe that goes under Lake McDonough, for example. And the condition was fairly good. We have done some test bits on different areas of pipeline where we could get to them. We performed an ultrasonic thickness testing that could tell us if the pipe was eroding. So where we've been able to in different areas of pipe, we have been checking and things do look good. We obviously haven't checked every pipe, but our most concerning parts are the ones that are under the river, just in case something were to happen, it'd be much more difficult to get to, more costly. So we believe we're okay. We can always change our priorities as we go if we think something's more concerning. I very much recommend that we continue to assess the pipelines as we continue through the plan.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, but your question about the Connecticut River, Commissioner, yes, it is a crisis. The water main that blew up in 2013 in the Farmington River in Windsor was a late 60s, 70s pipe. The pipe that crossed the Connecticut River is the same vintage pipe. So Dave Banker and the staff in engineering has been working hard to come up with a project to find a crossing for a water main to serve East Hartford from Hartford. We have identified that. We actually got a grant, a $2.5 million grant that's part of the whatever grant program that is through the feds, through Larson, Congressman Larson's. So that is on our radar screen, and we are working to build that. There's also Mrs. Mandyke, Commissioner Mandyke, identified another DOT project about a bridge. Bridges are good for us to bring a water main across. There's concepts about abandoning Buckley Bridge and blah, blah. There's some opportunities out there where we can get some new infrastructure across the Connecticut River.
thank you.
Any other questions for staff or any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I could. Commissioner Mandyke, I'm just curious, with a new water treatment facility, what is our estimated time frame as far as like, what's longevity of one? In this day and age, if we build one in 2035 or 2040, I'm not quite sure what the year was that we were looking at in there. How long can we project that will be online for that would be good before we'd have to replace?
Well, Reservoir 6 has been online for 50 years. And West Hartford's been online for almost 100. But as far as new plants, I would think probably over 60 years again.
And in Bloomfield, we did do an upgrade. So the filtration system was upgraded back in 2010, doing that again. So there's maintenance, that goes with these plants. One thing that we probably talked about in the larger meeting last month, we've been holding DPH off on regulatory issues on West Hartford. We have two basins, 9 million and 6 million gallon finished water basins, and they've been asking us to replace those. We don't believe they need to be replaced, but we don't want to spend millions of dollars replacing these things when we might be building a new master plan. So they've agreed to let us finalize this, but we need to move forward in some path so that we can get DPH on our side in terms of, not having to do things that they want. We call it sanitary surveys. Sanitary surveys tell us you got to fix this, you got to fix that, and all those good things. So we've been pushing them off on wasting money on infrastructure that wouldn't be utilized in the future. So that's our goal is to moving forward with this first 7 years of program.
Any other questions? Jessica, thank you very much.
No problem. Almost there. We got a couple more. Here we go. All right. Next steps, pretty much just a quick recap. As I said, we're going to, I could go. All right. We're good. Thank you.
Nice. Excellent. Good job, Jessica. But seriously, we would like to have a meeting just for this at Finance and one at Water Bureau to talk about this. Bob will talk about a structure of how to pay for it.
Mr. Chair, if I could recommend, can we try and look at, Commissioner Amanda, can we try and look at a dual meeting for those? So it's not, if we're going to be talking about the same thing and it's a special meeting, I think Finance and Water Bureau should just meet together and hear the same presentation, hear the same questions and answers.
Yeah, that was discussed earlier.
Fine.
Yep.
It's up to you.
The good part of having two of them, you can come to one.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Ray.
Am I up or are you up first?
You look good. Ray Burrell, who's one of our managers of water treatment, and Ray's going to be talking about. We've got two items on the agenda tonight talking about land, one of a purchase and one of a sale. And I'm just going to the intro. We had back in 2000. I'm guessing here 2013 when Carol Ewell, was it 2013?
2015.
Carol Ewell, who was our forester, who created an excellent program which would prioritize a master plan of what should we buy for watershed lands to protect our watershed. And she did a great job. Ray's going to talk about, we haven't spent and bought a property recently, but we used to put capital monies, in the budget, CIP money, to buy land, to protect our watershed. We're going to be talking about a piece of land in the Neepog Reservoir area. I just want to throw out the concept of the possibilities of the next agenda item, which is Glastonbury's sale of land, might be the ability to pay for this land, or if and when we finalize the conservation easement with Northwest Connecticut Trust, that $1 million that they give us could be another way of paying for this land. So there's some opportunities here to sell a piece of land and gain a piece of land that's more important to the MDC in terms of our watershed. So with that, Ray, go right ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott, and good evening, everyone. I know that we're getting short on the agenda now, so I'll get things rolling. So one of my responsibilities here at the MDC is ensuring that we deliver a high-quality drinking water to our customers, and that not only meets the existing state and federal regulations, but exceeds them. So I give a lot of credit to our facilities, our treatment plants, the operation of those facilities, and also to the men and women that operate those facilities to make that happen. Although the rubber really meets the road up in Barkhamsted in our water supply system, when we really focused on source water protection. And we look at source water protection in like a multi-pronged approach. What we do, we look at forest management, keeping our forests healthy, diversification of the species, the age class, we manage that very well with our watershed management plan. We look 20 years out on that. We also perform hundreds, if not thousands, of watershed inspections on residential and commercial properties each year, ensuring that these owners of these properties are not polluting our reservoirs or contributing to any contamination into tributaries that lead to our reservoirs. And lastly, we also, in another phase, we also look at land acquisition when it comes to protecting our source water supplies. And so that brings me to where we are here. We have actually identified this property back in 2015 when it was on the market. It's a 103-acre property that was on the market in 2015 for $1.5 million. We knew at the time it was definitely well above what the property value was, appraised at. Since then, in 2020, there was an offer on this property for $930,000 that the Designy family actually accepted. For whatever reason, that deal fell through. So here we are, 2022 or 2023, and we're refocused back on this property. It's a very attractive property. It was recently appraised. We had it appraised at $824,000, which brings it to about $8,000 per acre. The acreage is predominantly forest land with forested wetlands, has 2-acre pond, 8-acre field, and 2 streams, one drains into the Nepog Reservoir, and the other one drains into the Phelps Brook, which both of these tributaries lead to our Nepog Reservoir. So you could see from this slide here that the Designy property is adjacent to the MDC-owned land and also a critical piece of property, if developed, to our source water in Nepog. So if a developer came in, doing whatever they wanted to do, there would be major concerns on our end. Could cause a lot of heartache. And as Mr. DeBella pointed out earlier, you got a lot of emerging contaminants that are out there today, PFAS, and they're just continuing to come. So MDC is very, very fortunate to own the property that we own. Right now, just as an important note, the MDC currently owns about 21% of the Nepog watershed, and the state of Connecticut owns an additional 4.5%. So we got about 25% of the Nepog Reservoir protected. In contrast, the Barkhamsted watershed, MDC owns about 43%, and the state of Connecticut owns an additional 22.5%. So about 65% of the Barkhamsted watershed is protected. So there's no better way to protect your water sources than actually owning the land around it. You look around Connecticut and around the country, all these PFAS water source contaminations, it's because their water source isn't very well protected. Could be in urban areas, or they just don't own the property around it. So MDC is very fortunate to have the pristine bodies of water that we have, and it's really attributed to the land that we own and the programs that we implement to protect those source waters. So here's another slide that shows you, depicts the area of the Designy property. Interestingly enough, this 103-acre property was never really surveyed. So our appraiser and also our GIS staff, using their tools, actually feel this is actually 163 acres. And I believe the Designy family, they actually believe that as well, that it's higher than 103. Don't know why it's listed only as a 103-acre property, but we've already had a couple people verify it's about 163 acres. Just another larger, again, this is very important. You can see this abuts the MDC property. We have approximately 7,600 linear feet of MDC-owned land and 2,600 linear feet just on one of our service roads of this property. So it would be a big deal if a developer came in here. And it's an attractive piece of property, it really is.
Right, is that zoned residential?
It could be, yes, it could be developed as residential, yes. Yep. It would be, if the MDC had purchased it, it would likely be classified as Class 1 land.
And if I may be sure, there are other properties that we did lose by not buying, and they did turn into residential home development. So we're trying to, the Brown's lot up above north of this in the green area, that happened to
Yeah.
that.
So the Garrett Ridge property and the Norton property, those were acquired by the NDC. And probably, I think it's been, since 2006, we've acquired about 211 acres. So, this is a lot of acreage compared to what we've done since 2006.
So what we're looking for is we wanted to bring this to the attention of the Water Bureau, because we'd like to continue this discussion with the property owner. We just don't want it to be transparent and make sure that the Water Bureau, we don't need a resolution, but we just wanted you to be aware, we'd like to proceed with this discussion. We do have an appraisal.
Yes.
We have no idea if the Desanis would accept the appraisal offer, but we'd like to proceed with this property, and then come back to the Water Bureau with some kind of recommendations.
Yep, I highly recommend that. I think that it's an important piece for the MDC to protect the water. I don't have any objection. I'll open it up to commissioners for any comments on that. Everybody's in agreement for the,
If I could, Mr. Chair.
yes, Commissioner
Do you
Amanda.
have any estimates on what the carrying costs would be for this land, if we were able to purchase it? So what are the taxes that we would be paying on it? What would be the annual? Rough, I'm just looking for some estimates.
Yeah, so the property was appraised at $824,000. And I don't believe that, I don't know this now, but, they just recently entertained that offer for, $900,000+. So I think within that, and it's on the market right now for 1.35 million. So.
I'm talking about taxes.
Taxes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
under the statute, it's not taxed as its current use or its developable use. It's taxed as if it were improved farmland under 7 or 12-76, I think it is. But it's hard to know because it's not like it's function of value, it's a function of tax rate. So in the particular town, based upon that assessed value as improved farmland. So it's difficult. We can work up, I can't do it now, but we can work up an estimate for the next meeting as to what they might be and compare it with other like properties that we own up there. So it'll be fixed in time because again, tax rates tend to change.
That's in the statute.
Yeah, and but we'll come back with a full presentation on what we're proposing, and they may not, we only have one appraisal, and typically we would get 2 appraisals, but this is a very reputable appraiser that does this kind of watershed land. So we will.
In the past, we've tried to take this or buy this property in the past?
We explored it, but we knew at the time it was well above the market value.
We didn't make an offer.
I mean, this is this again, we're not going to have too many opportunities to purchase a block of property, like this in the future.
I agree. I'm in agreement. Any other commissioners have any comments? All right, are we still on this for Glastonbury?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So, do you want to go to the next agenda? Or it's still on Senate?
Well, it's the same one, so we're gonna.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So I had sent out an email to the commissioners. I had been contacted by the town manager from Glastonbury, John Weiss, who's here tonight. And he had reached out to me looking to see if the MDC was interested in selling the remaining pieces of Glastonbury land, 4 pieces of Glastonbury land that we had originally planned to sell as part of a package to Glastonbury. And that fell through, that component of the agreement fell through. We went through a process to get the land reclassified as class 3. And then that allowed us through DPH to actually abandon the water source. The water source was abandoned years ago in the 60s based on a water supply plan. So we had no problem there. We got a letter from DPH that said, yes, you can sell the land to Glastonbury. But it never came to fruition. So Glastonbury is looking and very interested in a couple of pieces of property. They're very interested in the MDC's property. Again, just transparency, would like to pursue that. I've asked Chris Stone to, the appraisal that we had done back in 2016 is, we believe, well below the market, and we think we should do another appraisal. I've told John that, and he understands. So we'd like to proceed and go forward with a new appraisal. Chris?
Yeah, and we had the property appraised back in 2016. It's clearly a dated appraisal, over 7 years old. The appraiser who did that work is no longer in the appraisal business. But he gave us the permission to use whatever's in his report. It's our report now, but whatever's in his report. So it's going to be updated by another appraiser who we've used before for other work. So we should have that turned around in relatively short order. But at least you'll have some idea. Listen, you may decide to pursue it, you may not, but at least you'll have a better idea of the value moving forward. So.
Very good. Any questions for staff?
And in that email that I sent to the commissioners, you had the maps, you had the information that we have to date. So we just need a new appraisal.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's well worth getting another appraisal and pursuing this with the town of Glastonbury. Commissioner Taylor.
Are there any developable parcels in this package of land? And we're talking about Glastonbury, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess my question is, if you looked at it in sort of the cold light of market conditions, how would this be valued?
Yep. Attorney Stone.
Thank you. Chris Stone. Working off the 2016 appraisal, and again, it's going to be updated. It may lead to a different conclusion, but of the 4 parcels that comprise the remaining NBC land in Glastonbury, 2 of them are, at least according to that appraiser, undevelopable. They have either no street frontage or have a topography that is just doesn't provide for readily provide for development. 2 other parcels, parcels 1 and 2, have some development potential. He surmised that parcel 1 could support 9 building lots. Parcel 2 could support 2 large, what he refers to as estate type building lots. So their short answer to your question, Commissioner Taylor, is half of the, 2 out of the 4 have development potential, at least as of 2016. And obviously our appraiser will update, the new appraiser will update that information and may come to a different conclusion.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, we're going to go on to the next thing on the agenda, which is opportunity for general public comment. If anybody's willing to speak, please come forward.
Thank you, John.
Judy Allen, excuse me, Judy Allen, West Hartford. I think it's pretty clear that Niagara's discounts for Niagara are set in stone. But the language for economic development isn't anywhere in the in the ordinances. And so I would request that you take a look at a real economic development rate like Regional Water Authority is doing, because I believe that would have more possibility for helping our towns bring in some new businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak under public comments, either online or in person? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is Commissioner's request for any future agenda items. Any commissioners have anything? Commissioner Adel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to get back onto the agenda, the EV charging stations.
Mm-hmm.
We will definitely have
Yep.
that on. I know we've been talking about that for a long time, but we will definitely have that on.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other items? Commissioner Mandyke?
Commissioner Mandag, Mr. Chair, I'd like to have a discussion at some point at the Water Bureau. In the last month, we have heard about 2 significant cannabis growing facilities that will be within our district. I'd love to know if we can anticipate some revenue from those facilities, if we have any issues that we need to worry about as far as discharge from those facilities. I'm sure other areas of the country have already looked at this, but it seems to me that some of the grow facilities, especially the one down at South Meadows that is going to be almost 85,000 square feet, are going to have at least a few plants in there that are going to need some water. So, I'm just wondering if, this is a significant revenue generation for us. Have we been planning for it? Do we need to worry about anything? But particularly on any kind of our treatment facilities as well.
Okay, we'll address that. Thank you. Any other future agenda items? Okay, next agenda item is commissioners' comments or questions. Okay, hearing none. We are up for adjournment. Motion to adjourn. Motion made. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night.
Thank you.